Easy Explain, Introduction to the Philosophy of History by G.W.F. Hegel. Chapter 3, Freedom, the Individual, and the State. So this is a big chapter that's really pretty clearly broken into these three parts. Hegel divides it into three topics. The first one is the nature of spirit, and that's all about freedom. So here Hegel's really working on saying how spirit is freedom, and as spirit comes to self-realize itself, it's discovering its freedom and increasing the amount of freedom that we all have as well. Part 2, topic 2 here is the means of spirit, which for Hegel is tied to individuals. Specifically what Hegel calls world historical individuals, those that use spirit and are used by spirit to achieve its ends. And finally, we have part 3 or topic 3, that's the state as realization. That's where all of this is building towards, it's where it's working towards. Think of all of us working together to form a collective that's bigger and higher than just us. We can come together and discover these laws and principles that help us to achieve higher levels of freedom through spirit. So let's just get into this topic by topic, starting with number 1, the nature of spirit. It's about freedom for Hegel. A few quotes here. First, Hegel says, world history is the progress in the consciousness of freedom, a progress that we must come to know in its necessity. Right, so world history here, very much so a progress. It's a progress of increasing freedom, of spirit becoming more conscious of its freedom. Moving on to the second selection, Hegel says the final goal of the world, we said, is spirit's consciousness of its freedom, and hence also the actualization of that very freedom. So as spirit becomes increasingly consciousness of its freedom, we actualize it, we experience it here in reality as well. And finally, for this first topic, Hegel says it is this final goal, freedom, towards which all the world's history has been working. So this is that necessary process, right? This is the goal of world history, is to increase freedom for all of us. Moving on to topic 2, the means of spirit. Again, this is going to focus on individuals for Hegel, what he calls world historical individuals. Let's look into this. So for starters, Hegel says if people are expected to have an interest in something, they themselves must be involved in it. And they must find their own sense of self satisfied in it. Right? He's kind of setting the stage here, defining what it might mean to be involved with spirit. Great little quip right here that Hegel has. He says, nothing great has been accomplished in the world without passion. Right? All great works and great acts are accompanied by passion. A little bit of a bigger passage here. Hegel says this imponderable mass of wills, interests, and activities, these are the tools and means of the world spirit for achieving its goal. Again, its goal of actualizing its freedom. To elevate it to consciousness and to actualize it. And this goal is none other than to find itself and to come to itself and to behold itself as actuality. In doing so, it will find freedom. Now here's our key definition. Hegel says the historical men, the world historical individuals, are those whose aims embody a universal concept of this kind. So in a sense, Hegel's almost saying that the individuals that become part of world history, think Napoleon, right? Really good example here. They're the ones that are aligning with the spirit the most, right? Let's go on and look at how he clarifies this. Hegel says the great men in history are those whose own particular aims contain the substantial will that is the will of the world spirit. There's an alignment between the two here. Thus, these men seem to create from within themselves, and their actions have produced a set of conditions and world relations which seem to be only their interest and their work. That's not the case, right? We're going to get into that next. He calls that the cunning of reason. We think, for example, that Napoleon did everything of himself, right? All of his decisions, all of his actions were his, but since he was a world historical individual, it was actually the spirit working through him. And this is the cunning of reason. This is what Hegel says. This may be called the cunning of reason. Jumped way ahead here. That it allows the passions to work for it, while what it brings into existence suffers loss and injury. The idea pays the ransom of existence and transience, not out of its own pocket, but with the passions of individuals. So spirit itself is not going to be sacrificed. Spirit is not going to sacrifice itself. It's going to sacrifice and use these world historical individuals to achieve its end, right here in this reality. Finally, topic 3, the state as realization of spirit. So think of all of us coming together to amass and form this bigger collective where we can achieve those higher ends of freedom. Hegel says the state is the idea of spirit in the externalized form of human will and its freedom. To go on, it is in the state, therefore, that historical change occurs essentially, and the elements of the idea are reflected in the state as various political principles. So these are the things that we come up with to defined as laws and, those high morals that we want to live by. Again, Hegel continues, the forms of government in which the world historical peoples have blossomed are characteristic of these people. So this is how Hegel starts to explain how through history we've actually had different forms of government. We've had different countries, just different ways of living and working together and building together. And this is how he's defining that. Think back to those world outlooks that we covered in the overview. Hegel says thus the various forms do not present one universal basis of government, as though the differences consisted only in determinate modes of expression and development, as of this universal basis. Rather, there is a difference here in the underlying principles themselves. So again, the government that you see, the state that you see, is being determined by the world historical individuals that are currently at play. One final selection here. This is a big one. Hegel says, world history only shows us how the world spirit comes gradually to the consciousness of truth and the willing of it. This consciousness and will dawns in the spirit. Spirit finds its main points, and in the end it arrives at full consciousness. Again, that is the goal of world history. That is its progress and its process, coming to that full sense of freedom as it self-actualizes and realizes itself. Big chapter here, broken down into 3 parts. The freedom of spirit itself, the use of world historical individuals to achieve its ends, and finally the culmination of state as the realization of spirit. For now, I hope this helps.